This is more than a podcast. It is a movement. Our mission is to transform the body of Christ, one rep at a time, through a holistic gospel message that integrates the spiritual and the physical. This is the Lightweight Strength Academy podcast.
Well, we're looking forward to this episode. In episode 5, we're talking about finding joy in the middle of the race, how persisting in exercise can deepen your faith. And we're gonna jump right in. And as we begin to set the context for these questions, just want you to think about this. Have you all ever experienced that incredible feeling of euphoria after a great workout? For example, I know, Ms. Gina, you just went on a run. How many miles did you run, by the way?
We just did 3 this morning.
Jess did 3.
Jess.
Look at that, Jess. For most people, that's hard. Like just 3. And what's your minute per mile pace?
Well, this morning was actually a group run, and so we were walk running.
Okay.
We probably, on the running side of things, we averaged 10-minute miles. Not very fast. Just fine, nice base run.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like when I'm trying to get back into running, it's about 10 minutes to 11 minutes. And it goes up from there as the run continue on. So,
Yeah.
So did you after running, did you experience this euphoric high? And maybe not today, but whenever you ran, have you ever experienced this euphoric high?
Definitely. It's definitely a real thing. And I feel like it's one of those, the harder, you have to really push yourself to get that high. And just like with any, I don't want to talk about like illicit drugs because I don't have an experience with that. But I know with anything in our lives, as we get used to it, our body gets used to what our level is. And so you have to push further and harder to get that boost. So we actually talk about training cycles a lot in running because you can't maintain like marathon level training year round. Like it's just not great for our bodies to keep that level. So like if I'm ramping up on a marathon training cycle, you do 3-4 miles a day the first week, and then you go on to 4-5 miles the next week, and then 5-6 miles. You just kind of inch them up. But then like after you've done your marathon, I'll not run for a week or 2 and like let it come back down because your body will adjust. And so right now I'm on a just kind of fun winter training. So nothing too hard, but on the days that I do work hard, I definitely get that feeling of it was amazing. Like it wasn't great. This is what I tell people when we're running. If you're enjoying it at the time, you're not going to get the high after. You got to be really like, this is awful. I'm pushing so hard. I might throw up. But then when you stop, you're like, oh, this is amazing. Like my body feels so good because I pushed it to that point. Like you got to find your limit.
I definitely agree. In fact, I think I've talked about Kelly McGonigal several times on the podcast so far, but I know other psychoanalysis or social psychologists have talked about in order to experience a runner's high, you have to go through this sort of breaking point or nearly hitting the wall. Not saying that you have to be so fatigued that you faint or something like that, but there has to be a significant level of struggle. And I'm not sure as to you guys' knowledge on the level of struggle that you want to push to, but as far as I can tell, it has to be in the area of running anyway. It has to be to the level of difficulty that it's hard to talk, right? Like, or hard to persist. So if you're, say, at mile 3, for example, and it's incredibly difficult at mile 3, and you push through to mile 4, even if you're not running that fast, the level of difficulty simply persisting to add on an extra mile to your run can result in that sort of euphoric high or that runner's high that we were just talking about.
I haven't done much long distance cardio, maybe back college days training for sports, but working out, you get to a point where your muscles are just spent. I do most of my cardio now playing sports instead of going out for a jog, which I know I need to go out for a jog. Yes, I recognize, because you can't always find people to play sports with, right? But as you're saying, to reach that breaking point, to reach that wall, to push through, and then at the end of it, you have that euphoric feeling. Yeah, there's so much truth to that. I've gotten to a point plenty of times just exercising, like resistance training for a couple of hours, and it's just, you reach that same miserableness, and then you throw up, and then you get back to it, then you might throw up again, and then you get back to it, especially on leg days or compound lifts. But yeah, it's such a weird thing that it's true and it exists.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You made me think about something when you said the compound lifts. Man, have you ever just returned to the gym after taking, I don't know how long the hiatus might have been, but the hiatus could have been, for me, I think the longest was nearly 4 months or so, and nursing an injury. So that's always fun. But when I went back into the gym, well, what are you expecting to do when you go back? Well, to pick up where you left off, right?
Yeah.
No, not so easily, right? And I think for a lot of people, at least the literature speaks about your cardiovascular fitness actually declines a lot faster than your anaerobic fitness. So anaerobic, speaking about your resistance training and the muscle that you gain and stuff like that. But something else that I just wanted to hit to with this point, you can feel that euphoric feeling, and it just doesn't have to be obviously to running, as Richard pointed out, but it could be anything that pushes you to a certain limit. Right. And so you end up finding out something about yourself that maybe you didn't know that you had. You find an extra set of, like my coaches say, like you have a deeper reservoir. We're going to pull it out. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't feel good, And so it's usually you have to push yourself or have to be pushed. Some people don't. One guy, I can't think of his name, but he mentioned it to this extent. He said, I'm only going to go so far to hurt me. I'm only going to go so far to put myself in an uncomfortable situation, and then I'm going to stop, right? And so I don't know about you guys' experience, but just really quick, do you have like an exercise that you're more comfortable pushing yourself at versus another exercise that someone else may have to push you in?
Definitely. So for me, I've gotten like through the years, at first I had to be pushed to run. I hated running. My sister's a natural runner, and I tell people this all the time. If you're not a natural runner, I am not. You have to work at it. And then like my sister, she's just skipping along, bebopping, like, come on, Gina, let's go. And I'm like, and she never understood it. After she had kids and she was running with me one day, she's like, I finally understand what you meant all those years ago about like not being able to just go faster. She's like, because I always could just go faster. So, for me, that took working. My other thing is, I've mentioned before, you guys know, resistance training is not my favorite. I'm a cardio person. Like you like cardio or you like weights. And some people are like, I don't like either. I'm like, figure it out, because you will. You gotta persist long enough and you'll figure out that you do actually like one over the other. So that's why I am a group fitness instructor, because I need a group to make me lift weights. Where if I'm in that group setting and I look across the room and it's like, hey, there's Joe, he just came to class and he went and picked up 10-pound weights. I've been here for 3 days in a row. I should probably pick up the heavier weights. So that bit of peer pressure helps to push me. And I'm not normally like extroverted. I know people are not getting that from this podcast because I'm talking a lot. But if I have the choice to go out and be in a group or stay home and be by myself, I'm usually going to be by myself. But when it comes to weights, I'm like, I got 8-pound weights at home and I'll pick up at the gym. So there's good pushing in the social settings because people are watching, and you got enough of that peer pressure that's like, I should keep going and I should go higher and harder.
And you can feed off their energy too. That's true. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. You can go ahead, Richard. I thought it was interesting that she mentioned Joe. I don't know, Richard, if you could speak to that too, but a lot of men I find struggle to participate in group fitness classes. They usually tend to anyway, work out by themselves. So
yeah, I mean, when we get the idea of group fitness class, it's, the Zumba or Pilates or yoga, and you don't see too many guys in those classes, right? But then you go to a CrossFit gym or you go to any sort of functional movement gym, or rock climbing gyms have a lot of guys there in a group, a big community. Yeah, you said you're either a resistance person or a cardio person, and you have to test it out and see which one. I've sufficiently tested it out, and I am not a cardio person whatsoever. I do it because I need to, but I always, I'd rather just work out faster with resistance training. So if it's a deadlift day, if it's a back day, like I'm amped for those. But cardio, I don't know, just even a group takes a little bit to get me excited for it.
Yeah. I mean, so I lean towards your perspective on this, Richard, because I've been just resistance training so long. But Ms. Gina, since obviously my background is in this area, this is a field that I love. Of course, I train more so of like a hybrid athlete. So cardio every day, resistance training every day. Well, not every day, but 5 days a week. And now my cardio has upticked past my resistance training. So every day I get cardio in, whether that be walking in an elevation or running or cycling. Well, can't cycle as much now because it's freezing up here. But the point is, Maurice stated something that it kind of motivated me to think a little bit differently about it. But he mentioned that his instructor told him there are not too many people dying from like a lack of strength, as in people dying from weak hearts due to lack of cardiovascular fitness. And so with that perspective, I'm thinking like, well, I can't ignore the truth, and the truth can stand to be tested. And so with that perspective, I said, well, there has to be an emphasis on training the cardiovascular, training your heart. And so one thing that the question here that we're discussing talks about persisting. The thing about persistence that I wanted to talk about, Ms. Gina, you hit the nail on the head. You said, in order for you to know if you have what it takes to be good at either cardio or resistance training, you just got to persist through it, especially if you hate both. Persist through it and find out this is your actual talent. And you would not have known that if you didn't persist. And so are you telling people that they can't stop at the first sign of struggle?
That is exactly it. And this is what most people have to run with me to get these stories. So you guys are getting this for free. I hope you're listening while you're out walking at least. But the first time I have run with anybody, they get to hear my running genesis story. I always hated running. I have alluded to my sister being a runner. When I was in high school, I was on the soccer team, and they made us sign a contract that we would run 2 miles every day during the summer. And then when we got back, if we didn't run 2 miles in under 20 minutes, we weren't going to be on the team. So I got out every day and I ran with my sister. And my parents' house is like at the top of, think like a sombrero, like we're at the top of a hill and you had to run down to go out. Then you had to run up a hill to get back. And so it was hills everywhere. And I was a terrible runner. And I never did make it in under the 20 minutes, but nobody else did except for my sister and one other girl. So they let us on the team anyway. But then jump forward to college. Still hated running. Didn't mind resistance training as much, but it was more lots of sports. I was lots of sports. And then when my youngest was like 2, my sister calls me one day and she says, hey, we're going to do a half marathon for our girls' weekend. And I'm like, you're insane. You're not getting mom and the aunts and cousins, all the girls that normally go, to do this half marathon. I'm like, how long is a half marathon anyway? Because that sounds long. And so she's like, I already called all them. They said yes. I called you last. So I called my mom and I'm like, Mom, are you insane? And she said, no, it's going to be fun. She's going to send us a training plan. It'll be great. And so she sends the training plan. And I have little kids at this time. So I'm like, how am I supposed to run 3 miles a day, like 3 days a week? This is impossible. I go to the gym. I'm on a treadmill. I mean, it was bad. But I learned a lot of stuff about myself during that period. One, I have a 2-mile wall when we're running. My body does not like the first 2 miles. I mean, to this day, and I've been running for years and years now, like 10 plus years. The first 2 miles are always awful. They're always hard. And then I'd say my body's like tensing and like I feel like I'm going to puke and my legs hurt. And then after 2 miles, my body's kind of like, we were giving you cues. We wanted you to stop. You're still going, so fine. Just go. Fine. And like it all goes away and I'm good. And I've learned like I'm good up to like 10 miles now. And then it comes back and it's like, that's probably far enough. Why don't we stop? And like if I push through that wall, it gets better. So that was where like, don't give up. Just like, as a Christian, sometimes the devil's throwing all these little things at you and you're just like, I can't handle this. But you can. And that's where, you lean into your study, you lean into your faith, and you're like, this is a wall. And when like, for me, at least physically, it's easier to push through. Like, I can do this. Spiritually, sometimes we get it all up and we're like, I don't know what to do here. And that's when you just got to push through and know that the goal is worth it. And that's where, like, I've got Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, like, all over our house. It's our family's, like, theme, our goal, that, like, run with endurance the race that's set before you, like, because you're looking to the author and the finisher of your faith. Like, don't give up. And I found in my Christian walk too, like, you just push through those hard times, and then it's like, oh, well, here's a little piece. Here's what you can do. This is worth it. So
I love that. Yeah, that it made me think about David too when you mentioned just you're leaning into experience, really. Once you make it through one trial or difficult situation, you're leaning into something that you know. You're leaning into evidence. And the evidence is, well, you've made it through one, so you can make it through another. And we can do like David did when he met with Solomon, and everyone else in the Israelite camp were afraid to go up against Goliath. And, well, what does the king? He take off his armor, give it to David, and David said, I haven't tested this stuff. I can't lean into this when in the heat of battle. I need something that I know. And of course, he went with God, who he knows, and he went with the slingshot, which he knows. And so it just, I don't know, for me, I think about the Romans chapter 5, verses 1 and 3. And I'm just going to read that really quick. It's from the New American Standard Version. And it says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have also obtained our introduction by faith into this grace in which we stand, and we celebrate in hope of the glory of God. And then here's the build here in verse 3, beginning. And not only this, but we also celebrate in our tribulations, knowing that tribulations brings about perseverance, and perseverance proven character, and proven character hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. So I wanted to look at verse 3 really quick. In verse 3, Paul he's building what I like to call this sort of proverbial crescendo. Like you can see everything just beginning to come together, and it's motivating, right? If I'm a serious Bible student, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to go through tribulation. But then Paul tells me the tribulation is going to result in perseverance. What? Wait a minute. What? You mean to tell me the only way I can experience something like persistence or perseverance, or to be even more specific, you look at the word perseverance, and it has this idea, the capacity to hold out or to bear up in the face of extreme difficulty, pressure. It has the idea of endurance or persistence. And so that Paul is essentially stating this, like, to be Christians, we have to have a significant level of toughness, tenacity behind our Christian walk. And so in other words, as you mentioned, the moment I see or I face the struggle to push past 2 miles, well, that's not necessarily the moment you stop. In fact, that's the moment you begin to say, all right, here's my opportunity to learn something about myself, right? Here's the opportunity to persevere, even if it's just not necessarily for another mile, but maybe for 0.2 or 0.5 of an extra mile. And so I look at that, and when we get to perseverance, Paul tells us something is going to happen as a result of us persevering. Proven character, testing, the process of having been tested and coming out as a tested individual, a person who has conquered and overcome whatever struggle that they faced. And so it looks like this, the process of enduring something that amounts to a test that promotes and validates the person's character. And now, so there's your evidence. You now have proven to yourself that you have what it takes. And I tell you what, growing up as a young fella, it's one thing my dad used to constantly emphasize. We went to the gym. I used to look at him, and I had just that eye of desire, looking at him and thinking like, man, how does he just go and push so much weight? And again, this is just an analogy. You could think you can apply this to anything. But I look at him and he would tell me, son, the same thing I got, my DNA is in you. You got what it takes. In the same way as Christians, we didn't come from some weak stock. We come from the creator of the universe, the God of heaven, a warrior. I mean, you read all of these great stories. These aren't just stories. This is who God is. And so I kind of remind myself about that as I'm working out and then applying that to my spiritual life. When I face something, here's what it is. It's an opportunity to prove that you too have what it takes to forgive, to persist, to show mercy, to give grace. And I think that's a lot of things that Christians kind of need to look at when we face difficulties or challenges.
Beautifully said. I think we have a misunderstanding of faith. We always think that faith is blind in totality. But I think all the examples that we see of faith in Scripture, it's people, yes, they're looking into an unknown future, but they have past experiences to go off of. You have past experiences inspiring you presently to motivate you into an unknown future. That's what faith is. And so you always have to lean on what you already know of not just yourself or your community or your friends, like that's faith too, but also God. Like if he's come through for you in the past and his nature is unchanging, then you know that that same nature is going to be there in the future too. You know, I go cycling quite a bit, and that's how I try to get my cardio because I detest running. And so around Dallas, there's a White Rock Lake. It's about 10 miles, and it could take you a little bit, but you push through. You have the wind hitting your face because it's a loop, right? It's wide open because it's a lake. And so, half of the time you're going to have the wind against you, pushing against you. And sure enough, around the same spots, my legs are like, hey, we're a bit tired. We, your quads aren't doing so well, right? Like, oh, your calf is a little tense right now, right? Oh, your lower back is getting a little weaker, right? You have to tell your body, like, no, we've done this before. We just did this yesterday, or we did this, 3 days ago or whatever. So be quiet. And then you try to set checkpoints. It's like, we've made it there yesterday. We made it there 2 days ago. We could do that again, right? And so it's going off past experiences and applying it to the future. And your body's always going to complain, right? Your body always wants to get out of stress. Your body always wants to get out of the struggle. And that's, isn't that true of us too? People who serve in any capacity, whether it's pulpit stuff or teaching in front of a Bible class or serving in a nursery, or, know that you should go over to your neighbor's house, but then you come up with any excuse in the book not to do it, right? Oh, they got other people visiting them. It's like, I don't need to bring them, a casserole because somebody else is going to do it. It's just at some point you have to tell your body, like, no, be quiet. Just be quiet and do it.
Ouch. Goodness, my toes hurt. Yeah, I've been guilty of that myself, man. Yeah, I think you're spot on. We do have to persist in a way that we sort of fight back against our bodies. And of course, there are certain signs that our body gives us that, we probably should take heed to. It's like, all right, yeah, you are actually tired. You might want to sit down for a sec, but let's
tunnel vision starts happening, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe that's not the light you want to be heading towards, but yeah, let's think about question 2. I think a lot of people, at least I've heard of some people talking about this idea, just having experienced this, wonderful feeling behind a great workout. And it usually goes something like this. Man, I did not want to come to the gym today. I really just did not want to get out the bed and go and do this workout, but I'm so glad that I did. And usually they say that after the workout, right? And so I want to talk about this idea, this amazing feeling that people typically get after a great workout when, the sense of calm has overwhelmed their body, reduced the stress, and improved their overall mood. And we're talking about this idea of endocannabinoids. Oh, that's a tongue twister. What are endocannabinoids, and what effect does it have on mood during / post exercise?
So just on a purely biological basis, endocannabinoids are kind of a new thing. And nowadays, people you hear cannabis and you think, THC, CBDs, all of these things that are like out there popularized right now. But endocannabinoids are things that our body makes. And really, they're just a neurotransmitter. So they help our nerve cells communicate with other cells. When that system is out of whack, then the mail's not getting through. Like, our body's not getting the communication that it needs. And the opposite side of that is the enzymes and things that break down those endocannabinoids. So once they've done their job, once they've delivered their message, then something needs to come in and break them down and tell them to stop. Otherwise, it keeps sending the message. And that's bad too. So that's the overall system, is this just communication. And obviously exercise and things help with our body to function correctly. And so we want that communication. We want inflammation in certain areas of our body for certain time periods, but then it needs to flush that area and get retracted so that everything that is in that inflammation is pulled out. When those communication things aren't happening, then we have fluid retention, and we have these things that aren't working. And so this is just the biochemistry of our system, and we can manipulate that by exercise, by healthy foods, by those things. The way God designed us is in perfect alignment. And then as we mistreat our body, as we're in an unhealthy environment and we're putting unhealthy things in, it throws our biochemistry off. And that's why we see lots of use of cannabinoids, which are not the naturally made ones, because we're trying to reset our body chemistry. And that's a whole nother soapbox. So I'm going to hop off of that one for now and let you guys talk. But that's just the system in general, is this communication between cells. And that's what it does.
Yeah, so the first thing that I thought about was, so when talking about endocannabinoids, like you mentioned how people try to supplement it with cannabis and things like that to get the same sort of euphoric feeling or high. And it's obviously attributed to the runner's high, hence the reason we're talking about it, but it's your body's reward system. And it's a natural reward system. So this is your brain essentially rewarding you for persisting. And if you think about it just in layman's terms, when we don't get the reward that we're looking for naturally, well, what do? We try to supplement it. And so I think when we add in the external, we're essentially hijacking the brain's or the body's reward system to try to force a response that we didn't work for. And this ties back into this idea of just feeling like we're owed something that we don't have to work for. Entitlement. Entitlement culture is real, and it's not just in the workforce, but you have it even in the sense of in the realm of exercise and physical activity, where we would rather sit on the couch or binge watch a show on Netflix or whatever, wherever you get your shows. But we rather do something like that and persist in sitting versus persisting in doing something that is going to challenge our body, but then reward us later, of course, So there are so many areas you can apply this to. You can apply this to your job. You go to work and you persist. And why do you persist? Well, for the paycheck at the end, right? Whenever you get paid. And you do the same thing in school. You go to college. Someone may ask, well, why in the world would I go to school for 4 years? Well, to persist and then ultimately get the degree at the end. But I think the person who said it best was one of my favorite all-time runners, Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt mentioned that he works for 4 years to run just a few seconds, 9 seconds to be exact. Think about that. 4 years to run. Oh, goodness, why? Well, to showcase that ability, to showcase his ability in front of the world on the biggest stage, but then not just to showcase it, but to feel rewarded that he's actually put in the time and the effort to experience what we would call this sort of euphoric higher feeling.
Yeah. I mean, there's fake confidence and earned confidence, right? And I think all of us rather have the earned confidence. You have a database to go back to of how you proved yourself to yourself. And when you supplement, if you try to get the reward without the work, then and even later on, you cheated. You did nothing to earn that or deserve that or merit that. And so it doesn't do anything for you long term. Like you get the short term reward or the feeling of reward, but even then, like it's an imperfect or incomplete reward as for what you could be doing. Like if you wake up at 5 a.m. and do your workout or you go on your run, for the rest of the day, you're going to feel different, right? It's like I did more than most people in the world did already, and it's only 8 o'clock, right? Or it's only 6 o'clock. How many times have I said that to myself, and it boosts me throughout the day, right? If I try to squeeze a workout in at the end of the day, or if I think like, oh, at the end of the day, I'll get something, and it's like 11 o'clock, or 9 o'clock, you put the kids to bed at 7:30 and kind of have your decompression time. You're just, I'm not going to work out anymore. So a day passes. It's like, I should have just done it earlier. Just again, it's like at a certain point, it's like, all the right things to do and all the right benefits that it's going to bring you. And it's just building up that earned reward system and that database of like, yeah, I know. This is what we went through already. Gotta just do it again. It's like your body wants to do it. Like it wants to reward you. Like everything's built in, like for your success. You just have to show up a lot of times.
For me, all of this kind of reminds me of our marriage. Like God gave us marriage, and He gave us that physical benefit of being married for spouses. And how has the world and it's seeping into Christian life here? It's been hijacked. Like we've got pornography, women, we've got romance novels. Like just face it, like that is us, like superseding what God gave us, and it's destroying the blessing that God gave us, because now we're not satisfied with what's naturally produced. That same thing happens when we, that's why you see people with cannabis and stuff, because they like that. And like we said, they don't want to work for it. And so then the natural thing that you've produced is no longer good enough because this outside supplement has eclipsed that, and you didn't have to work hard for it. So why work hard if you can get something that makes you feel better and it doesn't take as much effort? We see that in relationships. We see that, in our faith. Like, why do I have to actually sit and read the Bible and say, if I could just sit in a pew and have someone talk at me, if that's good enough? Like, why aren't we satisfied with the way God gave us these plans? And we see that dissatisfaction and us trying to compensate for it because we know we need it. We know we need faith. We know we need God. But it's like, oh, well, if I can just throw in, a concert and I enjoy that more than just sitting and singing, why can't I do that? And that's okay.
You made me think about the book Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. I read that a couple years ago. And in that book, he was just talking about microwavable religion, the wild and untamed part of God and religion. We make it suburban. And it's like we're removing that wild and untamed nature of the spiritual frontier to making it ultra formalized, ultra microwavable. And so now everything, more than just our food, the microwavable culture has extended into our lives. And so now it's like, it's too much to ask somebody to read the Bible. And again, I'm not trying to point fingers at anyone. This is something that is an active work in progress for me, right? And so like I have a board behind me. I don't know if you guys can see that. My wife and I have a accountability board. And on the accountability board is right here in the kitchen because, we Americans love to come in the kitchen. And so it's the first thing that we see. In fact, I put it right there strategically so that we can see that before we see the refrigerator. So it's like if you walk into the kitchen, we can't say that we didn't see the accountability board. We didn't know what was expected of us today. The point is, when it comes to achieving something, the only way that achievement, that happiness from that achievement will sustain itself is if you work for it, right? I mean, I think we probably can tell the difference from that when you spent mama and daddy's money versus spending your own money. Like for me, that was a big wake up call. I'm like, man, this hurts. Like I need to take it easy. Like this stuff is expensive.
On that point, we joke around with our 5-year-old. Like he'd say all the stuff that he wants at the toy store. Is like, well, you got to get a job, buddy. And he's like, okay. And then you see the wheels turning, and then like the next day he's like, can I make a lemonade stand?
Hey, look, at least he gets the point though. Right?
Yeah,
He gets the point.
So he has some money saved up. So now we go to a toy store. He wants a toy. He's like, you want to use your own money for this? He's like, I don't think so.
Yep. But I'm just happy that, at least he gets the point. And I think a lot of Christians get the point. It's just the systems in which we operate. James Clear talks about that in his book, Atomic Habits. Just the systems in which we operate that I think we can manipulate and improve in order to at least change the trajectory of our lives. So even though we may not be the person that we want to be right now, we may not be the ardent runner that we want to be, but you began running. And now you've changed your perspective on running. Like I am a runner. Today I ran a mile. Instead of this being the first day, this is day one of me running. I am a runner today. And then start to set the trajectory upward. So that's how my wife and I try to operate, because certain things are just difficult if you just look at the goal and never change the process or the system in which you're operating. So going along the same thought, we found and learned that endocannabinoids, this our body's natural response and natural reward system, does benefit us physically, but I think it extends outside of the physical realm. I think it extends to the spiritual realm, and I just want to talk about that a little bit too. Why is it beneficial to persist in exercise, which we talked about, but what can it teach us about persisting as a Christian?
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered that a little too on our way, but that just, this idea of we can do hard things and we can, whether it's relationships with other Christians, whether it is, you have a difficult project with the congregation. Like right now, we're trying to work on it like a Hispanic mission. And very few of us speak Spanish in our congregation. I mean, I've been working hard and that's a challenge for me. But I've been going to my Spanish classes and working on my Spanish stuff. And I sound like a very, very white girl trying to speak Spanish. they look at me when we go, it's like, me llamo Gina. And I'm like, give me the look. I'm like,
That's
what?
not the
Is that
right
not,
accent.
what, is that not, like, one, Southern. And then two, trying to speak Spanish on top of that. It's just like, I want to give up. It'd be a lot easier just to, like, can't you just learn English? Come on. You're in America, learn English. But that's not the way the gospel is, that's not the Christian attitude. I can't let my physical weaknesses and my desires, stop me from pursuing what I know is a good work that I should be involved in just because I don't want to learn another language.
I could think of so many stories, sitting around a table around, with people who we speak different languages. We all have Google Translate open and just trying to understand each other. And a conversation that would have taken like 30 minutes is now 4 hours because you're just like, no, I'm going to understand you. I'm going to figure out where you're coming from. I'm going to figure out why you think what you think and your background and all that because I love you, right? If you don't have the focus, especially as a Christian, of love, then it's going to be very difficult to do anything. There's my strength and conditioning coach at Arkansas State. He said you could either come in here with the mentality of what do I have to do? Or you could come in here with the mentality of what do I get to do? And so he'd print out like our daily exercise or our weekly exercise. It has the percent ranges, rep ranges, sets, different exercises, all that, right? And so you go to your folder, you pick out your sheet, and it's like, okay, if you're a skill position person, you have one thing. If you're on the line, you do another thing, right? So on and so forth. And then all the special teams people, they get to just work biceps and core all day. I'm sure they do a lot. But so you look at your sheet, you pull it out, and you're like, all right, I have to do that today. Or you have them, I get to do that today, right? 90% of the time, everybody in there, you groan and you complain, and you're like, all right, let me just do it. But then, like, you're there. Like, that's what you signed up for. If you didn't want to pull the sheet out and look at it and do what it says, then you shouldn't have signed up for it. I was just talking with somebody, with the Christian disciplines. It's like once you've given your life to Christ, something comes across your path. That's what you signed up for. Yes, you have free will and all that, but you don't really get to decide. You just do it. Like if God is calling you to go study with that person or go visit that person, or it's like, okay, well, I've been asked to lead a devotional thought, or I've been asked to speak in front of these people, or I've been, whatever it is, like, well, there's no debate. That's why I signed up for. I just have to do.
Have you heard of the movie The Rookie? Came out in like 2002. And you remember that line in that movie where I forget who said, I think it was Jimmy, but he said, you know what? He said, hey, Brooks, you know what we get to do today? And of course, you can apply that. I've always applied that to the Christian walk, but he was like, oh, we get to play baseball, and that's how I've always looked at it. It's like I come to worship and it's just a running joke in my family. It's like, oh, we get to do today, and I do it to people that seem, like their mood may be a little bit down, and I walk up to them instead of saying, hey, how you doing? Knowing they're not going to tell me how they're doing. I just walk up and say, hey, we get to do today? What? We get to worship God, or we get to read the Bible, and then it's a funny way of just trying to change the perspective of someone, right? Like you get to do this versus we have brothers and sisters across the world who their lives are in danger just to simply go and worship God. And so we have so many luxuries and opportunities. And again, not pointing the finger at people, but just in trying to encourage everyone, take advantage of the opportunities that we have. And it just, again, Ms. Jenny, you made me think about Hebrews 12:1-2 when you mentioned that earlier. One of the things that, is just so rewarding for persisting as a Christian. Well, we have other people that have gone on before us and did it. Hebrews chapter 12:1-2 talks about that, going back to Hebrews 11. Even when people don't think that they can follow Jesus perfectly, which none of us can, and they look at it like, oh, well, Jesus is not relatable then. Well, he's still relatable, but I can understand the sentiment when people, have a hard time maybe looking to follow his example because they just look at it and just think it's out of reach. But we have other people that scripture mentions that we can follow who have failed and gotten up and overcome. And we can do the same exact thing. And so I want us to think about the next question. And for this one in particular, we've covered That's what I love about conversations, right? When they're not so robotic, we just go through, we talk about it. We've covered half of the stuff under the discussion questions, which is good. Just shows you how great you guys are, because it's not me, it's y'all. It's all y'all.
It's you too.
Hey, look, man, I just like to be on here and learn and get educated. That's selfishly, I say that. But I just want to talk about the significance of just enduring as a Christian, and this idea of like, how can we unlock the runner's high? We were talking about that, the endocannabinoids. We were talking about the runner's high and how it's the brain's reward system and the feel-good reward system to persist in something. But how can we unlock that persistence high, if you will, as a Christian?
That was tricky, because I was thinking, like, how do we unlock it as a congregation of believers? You know, because we want to bring everybody with us. And, you know, I know about your home congregations, but I know mine, you know, they're always like, Gina, just, you know, don't talk to Gina about that you want to run, because she's going to be like, I'm going to come run with you. And I totally am. And I tell people this all the time. They're like, they look at me and they say, I can't run with you, Gina, because you're, you know, whatever. And I'm like, you've got it all wrong. You're not running with me. I'm running with you. Right? So whatever you need, like this morning, my friend came over to run. She called me a few weeks ago and was like, hey, I need to get back into it. I've been out for a while. I've had injuries. Like, can we run together? And I said, sure. And so, like, we just take off. And I'm like, you know, this is for you. Whenever you need to walk, it's time for us to walk. And that's fine. So how do we, like, when we bring people into the church, you know, that level of encouragement of, like, we're here to worship God, but, you know, just because I might be a stronger Christian and you might, like, you're not running with me. I'm running with you. Like, how can we run with each other where they are? How are we meeting the needs in our community? And, you know, and as we together grow, we can get that, you know, community and that sense of belonging. And that's where those feel-good emotions come in too, where it's like, I get to worship, not I have to worship.
When we have this opportunity to simply be all things for all people, I think the relatability of Christianity is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of it, because especially within the church, I think just being on one side looking in, of course, the preacher side, there are certain formalities, I think, that are necessary in order to, you know, be effective in the way that we may deliver sermons or teaching classes and stuff like that. And there's a certain way people are going to look at you that, in my estimation, is just unfortunate, because sometimes I get looked at as Superman when, you know, I'm just a regular guy, you know. It's like, I struggle the same way you struggle. I just so happen to hold a different position than you. But in God's eyes, we're all his children, right? And so it's like, when I look at it from that vantage point and I think about what the Christians went through in the first century, and Acts 8 and verse 4, and I'm going to read this from the New American Standard Version. Therefore, those who had been scattered went through places preaching the word. Philip went down to the city of Samaria, began proclaiming the Christ to them. The crowds were paying attention with one mind to what was being said by Philip, as they heard and saw the signs which he was performing. For in this case of many who had unclean spirits, they were coming out of them shouting with a loud voice, and many who had been paralyzed or limped on crutches were healed. And so there was much rejoicing in that city. And I just wanted to kind of point out something. Now, earlier in the same chapter, we know that Saul was persecuting Christians. But the thing they didn't do, and that we don't read of, they quit. The moment you quit, you have now rid yourself of any opportunity to prove something to yourself. You've just ridded yourself of any opportunity to receive something from God. And so even though it may be difficult in the moment, I think to myself, especially regarding what we're talking about now, how to unlock that runner's high, well, in the physical sense, we know we have to persist. And then in the spiritual sense, do the same thing they did, right? We do the same thing they did. When they experienced some sort of trial or tribulation, they persisted. It may not have been in the same, you know, city or whatever like that, but they still persisted in doing something that threatened their very lives. And then to add on top of that, you have Paul, the mentor of Timothy. Paul is about to die. He said, I fought the good fight and finished the faith. And he wanted Timothy to do the same thing. I'm thinking like, what? You want me to pick up where you left off? And is that what you're saying, Paul? And Paul, like, you can almost imagine yeah, that's right. That's right, Timothy. Right? Like I've given my life for this. Now, Paul was about to lay down his life for this. He was about to lose his life for this, and he wanted Timothy to do the same. The point is, in order for us as Christians to unlock this euphoric feeling, to be able to look at ourselves and feel good, not saying that we have a work-based faith. It's not saying that at all, but the idea is we express our gratitude to God by persisting. God has shown me grace. Well, I'm not going to look at the grace and say, well, this is an opportunity to just continue to be lazy and continue to let my spiritual life go down. No, God gave me grace. Let me do something with it. And let me show that I appreciate it by going out and acting on the grace that God has given me.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we get caught in the trap of fear. We have the fear of failure, obviously. Like we don't want to come across as dumb, or like I should know the answers to this. And so if I speak up, then that you feel like other people will realize, right? Or you go to work out with somebody, it's like, man, I thought you could bench like 405 and you can't. Why am I like, so I'm not going to work out with you anymore. Or I thought you could run 5 miles without walking. Man, I don't want to do that. And so you have this fear of like being called out, fear of failure. But I think a lot of people have a fear of success too. Right? I think that's a greater fear, or a bigger fear, or more prevalent fear than we recognize. It's like, well, if I do that, if I become that type of person, then I don't know who I'll be. Like, I don't know the struggles I'll face. At least if I stay here, I know the struggles I face. I know the lifestyle that I'm part of, but if I become that person, then I don't know if I'll be able to handle that. In the realm of teaching Bible, James chapter 3, verse 1, I'll read English Standard Version. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. It's like a lot of people, I don't want to teach Bible class. I don't want to preach. I don't want to tell anybody about the gospel because I'll be double judged. But you have to trust the one who inspired these words to be written. So you have to assume like the reward is greater than the possible judgment if you do it wrong. And then you were saying about grace, it's like, and then on top of that, you serve the one who wants the best for you, even more than you want for yourself, and has favor towards you and is willing to look over and forgive your wrongs. And so with all these things combined, we should be like, what do I get to do today? We should be motivated to succeed.
Well, I think that everything that we've covered, again, as always, if you all have questions regarding this, and I encourage you to keep studying on this, because there's so much, like I think we literally touched the top of the surface, but there's so much stuff that you can continue to learn about this euphoric high, the runner's high, persistence high, endocannabinoids, and things like that. And of course, being able to apply it to your Christian walk, and I definitely encourage you to do that. But until next time, continue to transform the body of Christ one rep at a time, and keep on being the light that you are in the world.